Hello, this week we will be discussing the education policy, among other things. Uh, the education policy in the US is very different than that of the European counterparts. It was more or less modeled off of Europe, but it's very different. And we spend probably the largest amount of money on education. However, we are not being able to keep up in math and science like many of the other developed nations. So there have been many reforms. A lot of people say that teachers aren't being paid enough, teachers are not being trained enough, there's not enough development, etc. So there have been a lot of new legislation, No Child Left Behind, the voucher system, just to name a couple. And this really hasn't changed anything significantly. Many people feel that they're, depending on where they live, they should be allowed to have the choice of where their children go to school, school choice, if you will. And so many local governments have been able to give the money that would go to state schools back in the form of a voucher for their child to go to a different school. However, most of this comes from property taxes, but school budgets are still being cut. There are problems with inequalities with this property tax, and it's based on where the dividing line is, almost like gerrymandering. It's very interesting to see some of these school districts and the way they're drawn so that they have the same demographics. But a lot of that happens with the education policy and doesn't always happen fairly. The other thing we're going to talk about is criminal justice. And we have some of the highest incarceration rates. Perhaps Turkey and a couple places in South America have more, but for the most part, the US does. And many people feel that we are really not helping to rehabilitate these people or show them any consequences, and that most of these people that are being incarcerated are either being sent in on a third strike with no hope of coming out, or have actually been in the system and it's all they know. So there seems to be two sides to the story there. Many people feel that with the amount of money that we're spending on prisons, that something should be done drastically different. And this has led to the most recent privatization. Tennessee and Florida were probably the two states that started with this privatization, and they feel that if it's run as a business, that it may help deter and save taxpayers money. Then we also have the thought about capital punishment. There are 34 states that allow executions today, and most of the people in prison, they feel, are generally minorities. So there are a lot of things that we need to work on, and we need to discuss how we can change the system, how we can make it more effective. And that's what we'll be discussing this time. Whether we can punish, rehabilitate, and separate them, criminals, from the general population, or if we're just breeding more criminals. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts.